Welcome back, everyone. It's been a while since our last episode, and today we're going to revisit a case that I know continues to weigh heavily on many of us: the disappearance of Maura Murray.
It's a case, that has for so many years now captivated the attention of, well, really, of the entire nation. A young woman seemingly vanishing into thin air. It's a story that's full of so many unanswered questions, so many, well, quite frankly, conflicting accounts. And it's a case that stays with you.
It does. It really does. Maura Murray, a 21-year-old nursing student at UMass Amherst, disappeared on February 9th, 2004, after a car accident in Haverhill, New Hampshire. Those who knew her described her as an accomplished athlete, reserved but determined.
Right. And before we get into, the specifics of her disappearance, I think it's important for us to sort of lay out the context, the events that led up to that night.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the days just before she disappeared, Maura's behavior was, well, it was a bit unusual. She emailed her professors and her work supervisor, saying that there had been a death in the family. But that turned out to be false.
Yeah, and that right there is one of the most puzzling elements of this case. I mean, what was her state of mind? Was this a sign that she was planning to disappear? Or was it, was she just trying to buy some time?
She also packed up her dorm room, withdrew money from an ATM, purchased alcohol, and then she drove toward New Hampshire. It suggests some level of premeditation, but the motive remains completely unclear.
Right, exactly. Was she running from something? Was she trying to start a new life? Or was there something else, something more sinister at play here? I mean, these are questions that have haunted investigators and really anyone who has followed this case for years.
The accident itself adds another layer of complexity to, well, this already incredibly complex puzzle. Maura's car was found crashed on a sharp curve on Route 112, a pretty isolated area.
Yeah. Witnesses reported seeing her car off the road, and a local resident actually heard the crash. And then a bus driver, Butch Atwood, stopped to offer help.
But Maura declined his help, saying that she had called AAA, which is, well, it's strange because there was no cell service in that area.
Right, that's a discrepancy. It seems small, but it raises some big questions. Was she trying to mislead the bus driver? Was she afraid of being discovered? Or was she just, I don't know, maybe panicking and not thinking straight?
And then, when the police arrived, just minutes later, Maura was gone, vanished.
The timeline here, it's crucial. The first officer got to the scene just minutes after the bus driver left. It's a very, very short amount of time, especially given, how remote the location was.
Yeah, and to make things even more confusing, there are inconsistencies in the early police reports. There are conflicting timelines, details reported by the officers on scene, discrepancies in the police log about the response time, witness testimony that contradicts some of the official reports.
Yeah. I mean, one witness said that the car door was open when they drove past the scene. And that goes against, well, it contradicts what some of the police said. It's important to remember that these discrepancies, they might just be because everything was happening so fast. But they definitely fueled a lot of the speculation and uncertainty surrounding the case.
These inconsistencies, they lead a lot of people to question how thorough the initial investigation really was and whether or not, well, crucial evidence might have been missed or maybe even mishandled.
Right, exactly. I mean, the lack of a clear, consistent narrative from the very beginning has made it, well, really difficult to figure out what truly happened to Maura.
So where do we even begin to unravel this? What are some of the main theories? What's emerged over the years?
Well, there are two main scenarios that have been looked at extensively. The possibility that Maura staged her own disappearance and the much more troubling possibility that she was the victim of foul play. And, let's break those down.
Okay, so let's start with the staged disappearance. There is some pretty compelling evidence pointing to premeditation. I mean, packing her belongings, the misleading email, the supplies found in her car.
Her actions in the days leading up to her disappearance definitely support that theory. But if she was planning to disappear, why would she do it after a minor car accident? It seems illogical to pick that moment to vanish.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, if she was planning this all along, why not just, drive away and leave everything behind? Why have the car accident at all?
The timing it's strange, and it's one of the main reasons that theory is so contested.
The other possibility, of course, is that Moore was a victim of foul play. And that's a much more disturbing thought. But the location of the accident was so isolated and the lack of witnesses, it makes it seem very plausible.
The circumstances, particularly that short window of time, between when she was last seen and when the police arrived, it really does lend itself to that possibility. And there's also that detail, that some witnesses mentioned about a man smoking a cigarette near the scene around the time that Maura disappeared.
Right. And that detail it's caused a lot of debate. The police haven't been able to confirm it, but it's still there,
Right.
lingering. I mean, could someone else have been there at the scene? And if so, what did they have to do with Moore's disappearance?
It's a question that has fueled so much speculation, hasn't it? And, without any hard evidence, it's hard to dismiss completely. But it also shows just how difficult it can be, to rely on eyewitness accounts,
Hmm.
especially in these high-stress situations. Memories can be unreliable.
Absolutely. And then there's that voicemail, the one that Moore's boyfriend, Billy, received. Just after she disappeared, it sounded like someone was sobbing.
That voicemail has been analyzed so many times. I mean, over and over. And the investigators, they decided it wasn't related to the case, but the timing and the fact that it was, well, sobbing, it does raise questions.
The voicemail, it was traced back to a prepaid calling card.
Yeah.
And those were the kind that Moore used.
Yeah, but investigators said it wasn't related, so there must have been something about the call that, didn't match up with what they knew about Maura or about what happened that night.
Right. I mean, it could have sounded like crime, but maybe there was something else that made them think it was just a coincidence.
Yeah.
Or maybe a wrong number.
Exactly. In Maura's case, it happened just a few days after Facebook launched, and it really shows the impact that the internet and social media can have on investigations.
This case it was before social media was really everywhere, like it is now.
Hmm.
There were online forums and websites dedicated to Maura, but it wasn't the same. So how do you think the investigation would have been different if this happened today?
Hmm. That's a tough one. It's hard to say for sure, but social media would have been a big factor, wouldn't it? I mean, witnesses might have shared information much faster. There could have been leads generated online. Law enforcement, they could have used social media to ask the public for help, for information. It could have been very different.
But social media, it can also spread misinformation
Right.
and speculation.
Oh, absolutely. It's a double-edged sword for sure. Social media can help raise awareness, generate leads, that's true. But it can also create a lot of chaos, a lot of noise. And it can be really hard to sort through all of that to find the truth. And for the families, the families of missing people, all that speculation online, it can be really painful,
Yeah.
really intrusive.
The Murray family has done a lot to try to counter, all the false information out there. They've been very vocal. They want to take back control of the narrative. They even started their own podcast, The Untold Story of Maura Murray, where they share their story, talk to people who knew Maura, and discuss their search for answers.
Yeah, that podcast, it's a really valuable resource. It gives them a platform to share their side of the story, without the media or the speculation that you see online.
And through it, they've really shown the human side of this tragedy. It reminds everyone that this isn't just a cold case. It's about a real person, a daughter, a sister, a friend.
Right, someone who is deeply missed
Hmm.
and whose absence, well, it's left a huge hole in so many lives. What about new forensic evidence? I mean, is it possible that new technology could help shed light on this case?
I mean, it's been over 20 years, but there's been a lot of progress in DNA analysis, digital forensics, even cell tower data analysis.
Yeah. So, looking at the evidence from the crash scene again or going over Moore's belongings, I mean, it could give us some new clues.
Things they couldn't do back then.
Exactly, like touch DNA analysis. That wasn't around in 2004. I mean, it can identify DNA from, even the tiniest bit of skin cells, so they could use that to see if anyone else was in Moore's car. Or at the scene, digital forensics, that could tell us about Maura's online activity, in the days before she disappeared. Maybe she was searching for something specific, or maybe there was a pattern in her communication that could give us some insight into her state of mind. And even though cell tower data was limited in 2004, they could still use it, maybe, to figure out where her phone was and track her movements after the accident. It's possible.
It's good to know that there's still a chance, even after all this time.
Absolutely. Even the smallest piece of evidence, if it's looked at with new technology, with a fresh perspective, it could be the key, the missing piece that unlocks the truth.
This case, It's filled with so many twists and turns, so many dead ends.
Hmm.
What do you think is, well, what's the most important thing to understand to figure out what happened to Maura?
Hmm. Well, for me, it all comes back to her state of mind. In the days, the hours leading up to her disappearance, what made her pack her things, leave school, drive to New Hampshire? Was she running away from something? Was she going to meet someone? Or was it something, something internal, something that we may never fully understand?
If we could answer that question, if we knew what was going on in her head, well, I think that's the key to this whole mystery. It's like her disappearance, it was just this sudden break in the story of her life, and we don't know why.
And until we can fill in those gaps, the mystery of what happened to Maura Murray, it's likely going to stay with us.
It's hard to believe it's been over 20 years since Maura vanished, and we still have so many more questions than answers. I mean, not knowing, the lack of closure, it must be agonizing for her family and her friends.
It's a loss that, well, it impacts everyone, not just those closest to her, but the community, the investigators, everyone who's followed the case.
And as more time passes, finding any evidence, it just gets harder, doesn't it?
It does. Time, it can be a real obstacle. Memories fade, witnesses are harder to find. Physical evidence, well, it can deteriorate. But even with all that, cold cases can be solved, even after decades.
The Murray family, they haven't given up hope, have they? Their dedication to finding Maura, it's truly remarkable.
They've been incredible advocates,
Yeah.
keeping her story alive, following every lead. They haven't let time, well, they haven't let it stop them.
It's clear how committed they are, how determined they are to find out what happened. And their podcast, The Untold Story of Maura Murray, that's really helped.
It has. It's given them a way to, to share their perspective,
Yeah.
to set the record straight, and to give people a more personal look at Maura's life.
We've gotten a much better understanding of who she was.
Yeah.
A young woman with dreams, with aspirations. And then her life was just cut short.
It's a reminder that every missing person's case, it's a human story. A family trying to cope with, well, with something that's unimaginable. And they want answers.
And they've asked anyone with even the smallest bit of information to come forward. Because even something small, it could be the missing piece.
That's right. You never know. Sometimes it's a memory, an observation, something that seems completely random that ends up being the key. It's never, never too late. If you know something, say something.
Maura's case, it really makes you think, doesn't it? About how quickly life can change. And it shows the power of hope.
It does. It highlights how complicated these investigations can be and how important it is to stay aware, to keep looking, to keep asking questions.
Even though we don't have the answers right now, the fact that the Murray family hasn't given up, it gives me hope. Maybe a new witness will come forward. Or maybe technology will help us find some piece of evidence that we missed before.
I hope so. Until then, Maura's story, it reminds us to appreciate our loved ones, to fight for those who are missing, and to never, never lose hope that someday the truth will come out.